Welcome back to Vintage Time, where cinema isn't just watched, it's uncovered. Today, we're stepping into a year that didn't just create films, it challenged minds, broke rules, and redefined storytelling. Welcome to 1965, a year where art met intrigue, and cinema dared to ask deeper questions. While most people remember the era for its mainstream classics, there exists a powerful collection of films that quietly pushed boundaries, psychological, emotional, and even political. These are not just movies, they are experiences. Stories that don't hand you answers, but instead leave you thinking long after the screen fades to black. If you're someone who enjoys cinema that feels intelligent, layered, and a little unpredictable, then you're exactly where you need to be. And before we begin, make sure you subscribe to Vintage Time and drop a quick "done" in the comments. Because what we're about to explore isn't just entertainment, it's hidden cinematic brilliance. Now, let's step into a world where every frame has meaning. Starting with number 10. Juliet of the Spirits, 1965. What if the biggest prison you live in isn't physical, but emotional? At first glance, Juliet seems to have everything. A beautiful home, a successful husband, a life that looks perfect from the outside. But perfection, as this film slowly reveals, can be one of the most convincing illusions of all. Juliet is quiet, gentle, almost fragile. The kind of person who avoids conflict, who trusts easily, who believes in the stability of the world she's built around herself. But that world begins to crack the moment she suspects her husband of infidelity. And what follows isn't a typical story of confrontation or revenge. Instead, it becomes something far more surreal and far more personal. As Juliet retreats inward, her reality begins to shift. Dreams, visions, and strange encounters start blending with the real world. Spirits appear, not as horror, but as reflections. Desires she suppressed, fears she ignored, truths she refused to face. The film doesn't guide you clearly between what's real and what isn't, and that's exactly the point. Because Juliet herself is lost in that same confusion. She's not just questioning her husband, she's questioning her identity. Who is she without him? Without the life she built around being perfect? Visually, the film is hypnotic. Colors feel alive, almost overwhelming at times, mirroring Juliet's emotional chaos. Every frame feels like it's speaking, even when no words are said. But beneath all the surreal imagery lies something deeply human, a woman slowly waking up to her own reality. Not through rebellion, not through destruction, but through realization. As Juliet journeys deeper into her subconscious, you begin to understand that this isn't a story about betrayal. It's about awakening, about breaking free from illusions we convince ourselves to believe. And by the end, one quiet question lingers. Is it more painful to face the truth, or to keep living a beautiful lie? The Loved One, 1965. What if death wasn't treated with silence, but with spectacle? In most stories, death is sacred, quiet, respected. But The Loved One takes that idea and turns it completely upside down. What you get instead is something strange, unsettling, and darkly hilarious. The story begins with Dennis Barlow, a young British man who arrives in Los Angeles searching for opportunity. What he finds instead is a world that feels almost unreal, where even death has been commercialized, packaged, and sold like luxury. Through a twist of circumstance, Dennis becomes connected to Whispering Glades, a high-end funeral home that doesn't just bury the dead, it celebrates them with extravagance. Perfect makeup, perfect ceremonies, perfect illusions. Because here, death isn't allowed to look like death. It has to look beautiful. As Dennis navigates this bizarre world, he meets Amy, a soft-spoken, emotionally fragile woman who works in the mortuary. She believes deeply in what she does, in preserving dignity, in creating peace for the departed. But beneath her calm exterior is a loneliness that feels almost invisible. And then there's Mr. Joyboy, charismatic on the surface, disturbing underneath. He represents everything this world stands for: control, presentation, artificial perfection. And the more time you spend around him, the more uncomfortable things begin to feel. What makes The Loved One so fascinating isn't just its satire, It's how quietly it exposes something deeper. A culture that refuses to face reality, that hides discomfort behind beauty, that turns even the most human experience, death, into something marketable. As relationships form and tensions rise, the film slowly shifts from strange to unsettling. You start to realize that beneath all the humor, there's something deeply tragic. People here aren't just avoiding death. They're avoiding truth. And in doing so, they lose something essential: the ability to feel, to process, to accept. By the time the story reaches its emotional peak, the absurdity fades, and what's left is something unexpectedly heavy. Because the film isn't just asking how we treat the dead. It's asking how we treat the living, and whether covering reality in beauty makes it easier to accept, or just harder to understand. The Hill, 1965. What happens when authority becomes cruelty, and discipline turns into something far more dangerous? Set in a scorching North African military prison during World War II, The Hill doesn't begin with action. It begins with tension. The kind that slowly tightens around you without warning. At the center of it all is Joe Roberts, played by Sean Connery, but not the version of him you might expect. There's no charm here, no smooth confidence. Instead, we see a man stripped down to raw defiance, silent, observant, and unwilling to break. The prison itself feels less like a place and more like a living entity. Brutal, unforgiving, and suffocating. Soldiers who step inside aren't just punished, they're dismantled. The guards, led by a cold and calculating officer, don't just enforce discipline, they weaponize it. Their goal isn't correction. It's control. And then there's The Hill. A simple mound of sand. But under the burning sun, it becomes something far more sinister. Prisoners are forced to repeatedly climb it until their bodies give out. It's not about physical strength, it's psychological destruction. Watching it, you start to feel the exhaustion, the hopelessness, the quiet rage building beneath the surface. What makes this film unforgettable isn't loud rebellion or dramatic escape. It's the quiet resistance. The way Roberts refuses to surrender mentally, even when everything else is taken from him. Every glance, every silence, every small act of defiance carries weight. As the story unfolds, lines between authority and abuse begin to blur. You're left questioning something deeper. When does order become oppression? And how far can a person be pushed before they either break or fight back? The Hill isn't just a war film. It's a psychological battlefield. One that doesn't rely on explosions, but on pressure, the kind that builds slowly until something snaps. And when it does, it doesn't just change the story, it stays with you. Alphaville, 1965. What if the future didn't arrive with chaos, but with silence? No explosions. No flying cars. No dramatic warnings. Just a city, cold, controlled, and eerily calm. Welcome to Alphaville, a place where emotions are outlawed, love is forbidden, and logic rules everything. At the center of this world is Lemmy Caution, a man who feels like he walked in from a completely different movie. A trench coat, a sharp gaze, and the instincts of a detective who trusts his gut more than any system. But in Alphaville, instinct is a crime. He arrives on a mission to find and eliminate the mind behind it all, Alpha 60, a supercomputer that governs the city with absolute authority. But this isn't just a machine. It's a philosophy. One that believes emotion is weakness, individuality is chaos, and humanity is inefficient. As Lemmy moves through the city, something feels off. People speak in flat tones. Conversations lack warmth. Even the simplest human reactions feel programmed. Words like love and why have been erased from language itself. And then there's Natasha. She's different, not because she resists the system, but because she doesn't fully understand it. Raised in a world without emotion, she's never experienced love, only heard of it as something dangerous, something illogical. Through Lemmy, she begins to encounter something she was never meant to feel. And that's where the film quietly transforms. What starts as a mission becomes something more intimate, more dangerous. Because in a world built on control, the smallest human emotion becomes an act of rebellion. Alphaville doesn't overwhelm you with spectacle, it unsettles you with ideas. It asks questions that feel uncomfortably relevant even today. What happens when logic replaces empathy? When systems decide what it means to be human? As the story unfolds, you realize something chilling. The most powerful weapon in this world isn't technology. It's emotion. And in a place where feeling is forbidden, even love becomes revolutionary. Pierrot le Fou, 1965. What if escaping your life only leads you deeper into chaos? Ferdinand has everything that should make him happy. A stable life, social status, comfort. But beneath the surface, there's a quiet suffocation. Conversations feel empty. People feel artificial. The world around him starts to lose meaning. And then he meets Marianne. She isn't stability. She's unpredictability. Mystery. A spark in a life that had gone dull. And just like that, without warning, Ferdinand walks away from everything he knows and follows her into the unknown. What begins as escape quickly turns into something else entirely. They run. From the law, from their past, from something neither of them fully understands. The journey takes them across landscapes that feel almost dreamlike, beautiful, chaotic, and constantly shifting. But this isn't a romantic escape. It's a collision. Between reality and illusion, love and obsession, freedom and destruction. Ferdinand, who begins as a man searching for meaning, slowly unravels. He narrates his thoughts, questions existence, drifts between clarity and confusion. Meanwhile, Marianne remains unpredictable, sometimes affectionate, sometimes distant, always just out of reach. And that's what makes their connection so powerful and so dangerous. Because this isn't love in its pure form. It's impulsive, volatile, almost self-destructive. The film itself refuses to follow rules. Scenes break expectation. Dialogue feels philosophical one moment and absurd the next. Colors are bold, almost overwhelming, like emotions turned into visuals. You don't just watch Pierrot le Fou, you experience it. As their journey spirals further out of control, one thing becomes clear. Escaping life doesn't mean finding freedom. Sometimes, it just removes the structure that was holding you together. And when that structure is gone, what's left? A man searching for meaning in a world that no longer makes sense. A love that burns too fast to last. And a reality that slowly slips into madness. Because in the end, the most dangerous place isn't the world you run from. It's the one you create. The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, 1965. What if loyalty isn't about right or wrong, but about survival? In the shadowy world of espionage, truth is rarely what it seems, and The Spy Who Came In From the Cold makes that painfully clear from the very beginning. There are no heroic entrances here. No glamorous missions. Just a man, tired, worn down, and slowly losing faith in everything he once believed. That man is Alec Liamas. A British intelligence officer stationed in Berlin, Liamas has spent years playing the game, manipulating, deceiving, surviving. But when one of his last agents is killed trying to cross the border, something shifts inside him. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just enough to make you realize he's done. Or at least he wants to be. What follows is a mission that doesn't feel like a mission at all. Instead of action, there's silence. Instead of clarity, there's confusion. Liamas is sent back into the field under the guise of a disgraced, broken man. To sell that illusion so convincingly that even the enemy believes it. And they do. As he descends deeper into this carefully constructed lie, the lines between performance and reality begin to blur. He drinks more. He isolates himself. He becomes exactly what he's pretending to be. And that's when the story quietly tightens its grip. Because this isn't a spy thriller about outsmarting the enemy. It's about being used by your own side. Enter Liz Gold, a woman who represents something rare in this world: sincerity. She's not part of the game. She doesn't understand deception, and that's exactly why her presence feels so fragile. Through her, we see glimpses of the man Liamas used to be, or maybe the man he could have been. But in a world built on lies, honesty is dangerous. The deeper Liamas goes, the more unsettling the truth becomes. There are no clear sides. No moral victories. Just strategies layered within strategies, each one more manipulative than the last. And then comes the realization that hits hardest. What if the mission was never about winning? What if it was about sacrifice? The spy who came in from the cold strips away the illusion of espionage and replaces it with something far colder. A world where people are expendable, trust is a liability, and survival often comes at the cost of your own humanity. By the end, you're not left with excitement. You're left with a question that lingers long after the credits roll. In a game where everyone lies, who really wins? Inside Daisy Clover, 1965. What if fame doesn't save you, but slowly erases you? Daisy Clover isn't supposed to be a star. She's loud, unfiltered, a little chaotic, living in a broken home, scraping by in a world that doesn't offer second chances. But she has something rare, something raw. A voice that doesn't feel polished, it feels real. And in Hollywood, that kind of authenticity can either make you or destroy you. When a powerful studio executive discovers her, everything changes overnight. The struggle disappears. The doors open. And suddenly, Daisy is no longer just a girl trying to survive. She's a product. A name. A face. A brand. At first, it feels like a dream. The kind people chase their entire lives. Fancy houses. Big contracts. Pension. Validation. But the deeper Daisy steps into this world, the more she begins to realize something unsettling. None of it belongs to her. Her image is controlled. Her behavior is managed. Even her emotions feel scripted. Every smile, every interview, every appearance, it's all part of a performance that never truly ends. And then there's Wade Lewis. Charming. Magnetic. Complicated. He enters Daisy's life like a whirlwind, offering connection in a place that feels artificial. But just like everything else in Hollywood, nothing is as simple as it seems. Their relationship isn't built on stability, it's built on illusion. And illusions don't last. As the pressure builds, Daisy begins to crack. Not in loud, explosive ways, but in quiet, deeply human moments. Moments where you can feel her losing grip on who she really is. Because the question isn't whether she can handle fame. It's whether she can survive what fame demands. Inside Daisy Clover isn't just a story about success. It's about identity. About what happens when the world starts telling you who you are, and you slowly begin to believe it. By the time Daisy reaches the peak of everything she once dreamed of, there's a haunting realization waiting for her. She got everything she wanted, but lost everything that mattered. And sometimes, the spotlight doesn't reveal who you are. It hides it. The Agony and the Ecstasy, 1965. What does it really cost to create something timeless? At the heart of the Agony and the Ecstasy is a battle, not of swords or armies, but of will, vision, and relentless obsession. This isn't just a film about art. It's about the struggle behind it, the pain that shapes it, the sacrifice that defines it. Michelangelo is not introduced as a genius. He's introduced as a man under pressure. A sculptor who sees the world differently, who feels deeply connected to his craft, but is suddenly tasked with something far beyond what he wants. Painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. A project he neither asked for, nor believes he can complete. And standing opposite him is Pope Julius II. Powerful. Demanding. Unyielding. Their relationship isn't cooperative, it's confrontational. Two strong minds clashing over control, purpose, and legacy. The Pope wants results. Michelangelo wants meaning. And between those two forces, tension builds. What makes this film so compelling isn't the final masterpiece, it's the process. The long, exhausting, frustrating journey of creation. Days turning into months. Months into years. Doubt creeping in. Confidence fading out. You see Michelangelo struggle, not just physically painting high above the ground, but mentally. Questioning his purpose. His ability. His place in something so monumental. Because true art doesn't come from comfort. It comes from conflict. As the ceiling slowly begins to take shape, something shifts. Not just in the artwork, But in the artist, every stroke becomes more than paint. It becomes expression, belief, identity. And the Pope, despite his impatience, begins to understand something too. That greatness cannot be rushed. That vision cannot be forced. That some creations demand everything a person has to give. The Agony and the Ecstasy doesn't just show you a masterpiece, it makes you feel the cost of it. The sleepless nights, the self-doubt, the relentless pursuit of perfection. And by the end, when the ceiling is finally revealed, it's not just a moment of triumph. It's a moment of realization that behind every great work of art, there's a story of struggle no one sees. The Sandpiper, 1965. What happens when love doesn't fit the rules, but refuses to be ignored? On the rugged coastline of California, far from the noise of society, lives Laura Reynolds, a woman who has chosen a life of independence. She's an artist, a free spirit, someone who doesn't believe in the structures most people rely on. No expectations. No limitations. Just her son, and the quiet rhythm of nature. At first glance, her life feels almost untouched, pure, even. But everything begins to shift the moment she crosses paths with Edward Hewitt. He's the opposite of her in every way. A respected school headmaster. Disciplined. Composed. Deeply rooted in moral structure. A man who believes in order, responsibility, and the life he has carefully built, including his marriage. Their worlds were never meant to collide. And yet, they do. What begins as a simple interaction slowly transforms into something far more complicated. There's no sudden spark, no dramatic confession, just a quiet, undeniable pull that neither of them can fully explain. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because this isn't just about attraction. It's about conflict. Laura represents freedom, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. Edward represents structure, the kind that holds everything together. And somewhere between those two extremes, something fragile begins to form. But love, in this case, isn't liberating. It's disruptive. As their connection deepens, the consequences begin to surface. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in small, uncomfortable moments. Conversations that linger too long. Silences that say too much. The growing weight of choices that can't be undone. Edward begins to question everything he once believed in. His identity. His responsibilities. The life he thought defined him. And Laura, for someone who values independence, finds herself facing something unfamiliar. Attachment. The film doesn't rush. It allows emotions to breathe, to build, to complicate themselves. And in doing so, it presents love not as something simple, but as something deeply human. Messy. Contradictory. Sometimes even painful. Because not all love stories are meant to last. Some exist to challenge you. To change you. To force you to confront who you really are. By the end, there's no easy resolution. No perfect ending. Just a quiet understanding that sometimes the most powerful connections in life are the ones you were never meant to have. A Patch of Blue, 1965. What if the person who helps you see the world is the one who was never allowed to see it? Selena Darcy lives in darkness, but not just the kind caused by blindness. Her world is small, isolated, controlled by a life that never gave her the chance to understand what's beyond it. Raised in a harsh environment, surrounded by neglect and cruelty, she has learned to exist, but not to truly live. Then one day, something unexpected happens. She meets Gordon Raff. He doesn't enter her life with noise or urgency. Just quiet kindness, patience, respect. Things Selena has never experienced before. And through that simplicity, something begins to change. For the first time, she starts to feel curiosity. About the world. About herself. Through Gordon, Selena begins to see, not with her eyes, but with understanding. Colors she's never witnessed suddenly hold meaning. Emotions she's never felt begin to surface. And what unfolds between them is something incredibly rare. A connection built not on appearance, but on humanity. But as their bond grows stronger, so does the reality surrounding them. Because the world they live in isn't kind to differences. It doesn't embrace what it doesn't understand. And in this case, their connection challenges more than just personal boundaries. It challenges societal ones. Gordon sees Selena for who she is. But the world sees something else. And that's where the film finds its emotional weight. Because this isn't just a story about love. It's about dignity, acceptance, and the quiet power of compassion in a world that often lacks it. Selena's journey isn't about gaining sight, it's about gaining awareness. About realizing that her life can be more than what she was told it had to be. And Gordon isn't just a guide. He's a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful connections don't come from shared experiences. They come from shared understanding. By the time the story reaches its end, you're left with something that doesn't fade easily. Not just emotion, but reflection. Because a patch of blue doesn't ask you to watch. It asks you to feel. And in doing so, it leaves behind a question that lingers quietly. In a world full of people who can see, how many truly understand? And that wraps up our journey through 10 thought-provoking films from 1965. Stories that didn't just entertain, but challenged perspectives, explored human complexity, and dared to be different. These films may not have dominated the spotlight, but they carry something far more powerful: depth. The kind that stays with you. The kind that makes you think long after the credits roll. Now we want to hear from you. Which of these films have you already seen? And which ones are going straight onto your watch list? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you enjoyed uncovering these hidden cinematic gems, don't forget to subscribe to Vintage Time for more deep dives, forgotten classics, and powerful stories from across film history. Until next time, keep exploring, keep watching, and keep discovering the stories most people miss.